Your soulmate gave up their future for you, then blamed you for it. My beloved child, there is something your soulmate has never been able to admit without feeling a knot tighten inside their chest. They made a decision about their future because of you, and when that decision began costing more than they expected, they quietly turned you into the reason everything went wrong. But here is what makes this complicated. You never asked them to make that sacrifice. You may not have even known there was a choice being made. Behind closed doors, they were standing between two paths, one that promised security, opportunity, and a completely different life, and another that kept them emotionally connected to you. They chose the second path. At first, they told themselves it was love. They imagined that someday you would understand what they had surrendered and realize just how deeply they cared. But when life failed to unfold the way they pictured it, love became frustration. Frustration became resentment. And eventually, one painful thought entered their mind: I gave all of that up because of them. Don't skip, because the strangest part is that someone recently challenged that story. Your soulmate had been repeating the same explanation for so long that even they had started believing it completely. They remembered the opportunity they turned down, the plans they postponed, the people who told them they were making a mistake. Every disappointment afterward seemed to become another piece of evidence against you, even though you had never been given the chance to choose alongside them. Then someone close to them asked one simple question: did they actually ask you to give it up? Your soulmate went silent. Not defensive. Not angry. Silent. Because for the first time, they were forced to separate what you actually did from what they had secretly expected you to do afterward. They had made an invisible agreement with you, one you never knew existed. In their heart, the bargain sounded something like this: I will sacrifice my future for you, and someday you will prove that sacrifice was worth it. But you never agreed to those terms. And when you failed to fulfill a promise you never made, they blamed you. Stay till the end, because that realization didn't immediately bring relief. It uncovered something much harder for them to face. What they finally remembered was the moment before that life-changing decision, when nobody was forcing their hand and you weren't even in the room. They had been afraid. The future they supposedly gave up for you demanded courage from them. It meant leaving something familiar, taking a risk, possibly becoming someone they weren't ready to become. Choosing you, or rather, choosing the possibility of you, gave them an emotional reason to stay where they felt safer. That truth shook them because it meant their sacrifice had never been as simple as they claimed. Yes, their feelings for you mattered. Yes, losing that opportunity changed their life. But blaming you protected them from admitting that part of the decision belonged entirely to them. And now they are looking back at everything differently, including the way they treated you afterward. Something huge is waiting for you, because there is one detail about that abandoned future they still haven't told anyone, and once you understand what they were actually planning to do before they chose you, their resentment begins to make sense in a completely unexpected way. What they were planning before they chose you was far bigger than simply accepting a new opportunity. Your soulmate had imagined an entirely different version of their life. New surroundings, new responsibilities, new people, and enough distance to leave certain painful memories behind. They had quietly convinced themselves that this future would finally make them feel successful, respected, and in control. There was even a date when everything was supposed to begin. But as that date approached, something unexpected happened. Their feelings for you became impossible to ignore. Suddenly, leaving didn't feel like moving forward. It felt like permanently closing a door they weren't emotionally ready to close. So they stepped away from the future they had spent months preparing for. They told almost no one the full reason. And deep inside, they expected one thing from you afterward: not money, not repayment, not even an apology. They expected you to somehow recognize the magnitude of what they had done without ever being told. That expectation became the hidden wound between you. Every time you seemed uncertain about them, they remembered what they had surrendered. Every time you focused on your own life, they wondered why you couldn't see what they had sacrificed. And every moment when you didn't move closer became proof, in their mind, that they had made the wrong choice. But there was a painful contradiction they refused to acknowledge. They were angry with you for not appreciating something they deliberately kept secret. Then came the conversation that changed everything. The person who had challenged them before pushed further and said, "You didn't give them a choice. You made the decision alone, then expected them to carry the consequences." Those words landed differently. Your soulmate tried to defend themselves, but something stopped them. Because suddenly they remembered a specific conversation with you from before they abandoned their plans. And one sentence you said that day completely challenged the story they had been telling themselves. You had never asked them to stay. In fact, what you said may have sounded almost like permission to leave. You wanted them to make the decision that was right for their life, even if that decision created distance between you. At the time, your soulmate heard those words through the fear of losing you. Instead of hearing care, they heard uncertainty. Instead of hearing freedom, they heard rejection. So when they eventually stayed, they secretly believed they were proving that their feelings were stronger than yours. Years, months, or perhaps countless difficult nights later, that misunderstanding hardened into blame. But now they can finally see the uncomfortable possibility: you may have been the one person who never tried to control their future at all. And that realization has created a new problem, because your soulmate recently went back to something connected to the opportunity they abandoned. They weren't expecting anything to still be there. But what they discovered has forced them to consider a question they thought was buried forever, and the answer could completely change what happens between you next. The discovery came from something your soulmate almost ignored. An old message, buried beneath years of ordinary conversations, was still sitting exactly where they had left it. It came from someone connected to the future they abandoned, and reading it again brought back details they had conveniently forgotten. The opportunity had not disappeared because of you. No one had taken it away. In fact, they had been given more than one chance to reconsider before the door finally closed. And there, in plain words, was proof that your soulmate had personally declined the final chance. Nobody mentioned your name. Nobody pressured them. The decision was theirs. That realization was painful enough, but then they noticed the date. It was sent after the conversation where you had encouraged them to choose what was best for their future. Don't skip, because that date destroyed the excuse they had carried for so long. They could no longer honestly say, "You made me stay." The truth was becoming impossible to avoid. They stayed because some part of them wanted to. But accepting responsibility didn't erase the years of emotion attached to that choice. Your soulmate sat with a strange mixture of regret, embarrassment, and grief. They began remembering the moments when they had been colder toward you than you deserved. The times they withdrew without explaining why. The arguments where their frustration seemed much bigger than whatever had actually happened. You may have wondered why something small could suddenly make them distant. Now the hidden reason becomes clearer. They weren't always reacting to the present moment. Sometimes they were reacting to an old decision they had never forgiven themselves for making. And whenever life disappointed them, you became the easiest symbol of the road not taken. Yet something else happened while they reread that message. Instead of wishing they had chosen differently, they found themselves thinking about you. Not with anger this time. With fear. Because if blaming you had protected them from facing their own choices, what would happen when they finally stopped blaming you? They would have to admit what their decision actually revealed about their feelings. That is the truth they have been resisting. Your soulmate didn't simply surrender a future because they were confused or weak. At that moment in their life, the possibility of losing you frightened them more than losing the opportunity. They may regret how they handled the decision, but they cannot pretend you meant nothing. And now they understand something even more uncomfortable. Their resentment may have survived precisely because their feelings never completely disappeared. It was easier to say, "You cost me my future," than to admit, "I chose to stay because I couldn't imagine walking away from you." But this realization has not brought them directly toward you yet. Something is holding them back. There is another person who knew about the decision from the very beginning, someone your soulmate confided in before they gave everything up. And recently, that person revealed what your soulmate said about you on the exact night they made their final choice. Those words tell a very different story from the one you were blamed for later. That person remembered the night far more clearly than your soulmate expected. There had been no dramatic argument, no demand from you, no last-minute pressure forcing them to choose. Your soulmate had simply called, sounding torn between excitement about the future ahead and fear about what leaving might mean for the connection they felt with you. Then they said something they would later completely bury beneath resentment. "If I leave now, I might spend the rest of my life wondering what could have happened with them." Those words changed everything. Because they revealed that your soulmate wasn't trapped. They were choosing between two futures they genuinely wanted, and at that moment, the future containing even the possibility of you mattered more. When they heard those words repeated back to them recently, they couldn't argue. They remembered saying them. And suddenly, the story they had used to blame you began collapsing from the inside. But there was another sentence from that night, one your soulmate had almost forgotten. Their confidant reminded them, "You told me you weren't staying because they asked you. You said you were staying because you needed to know whether what you felt was real." That landed even harder. Your soulmate realized their original decision had been personal. A risk they willingly accepted because uncertainty about you felt more unbearable than uncertainty about their career, plans, or destination. The blame came later, after reality failed to reward that risk immediately. They had expected their sacrifice to produce certainty. Instead, they found complicated timing, emotional distance, misunderstandings, and moments when you seemed completely unaware of the battle happening inside them. Slowly, they rewrote the memory. I chose this became, I did this for you. And eventually, I did this for you became, you made me lose everything. But now someone who witnessed the beginning had reminded them of the truth. And that truth has left your soulmate with a decision they can no longer postpone. If they continue blaming you, they can protect their pride, but they may permanently lose the person they once considered worth changing their entire future for. If they finally admit what really happened, they will have to tell you something far more vulnerable than an apology. They will have to confess that beneath all the resentment was disappointment, not because you ruined their life, but because they secretly hoped choosing you would eventually lead to a life with you. Stay till the end, because they have already started preparing for that conversation. They even know the first thing they want to say. But before reaching out, they did something unexpected. They contacted the person connected to that abandoned opportunity one more time. What they learned during that conversation revealed that the future they thought they lost forever may not actually be gone, and now your soulmate faces a choice strangely similar to the one that started all of this. This time, however, your soulmate is standing before that choice as a completely different person. The conversation about their abandoned opportunity did not magically restore everything they once walked away from, but it revealed something they never expected: another path may still exist. Different circumstances. Different timing. Perhaps even a different version of the dream they thought was permanently gone. For a moment, excitement rushed through them. Then came the old fear. What if moving toward that future means creating distance from you again? What if choosing themselves now destroys whatever possibility remains between you? But almost immediately, they recognized the pattern. Years ago, they made a life-changing decision while silently placing you at the center of it. They never asked what you wanted. They never explained what was at stake. And afterward, they punished you emotionally for consequences you never agreed to carry. This time, they know they cannot make another secret sacrifice and call it love. That realization has changed what they want to say to you. Their first instinct was to come back with an apology and explain everything at once. But they began writing down the words they had avoided for so long, and one sentence stopped them cold: I blamed you because admitting I chose it myself hurt too much. They stared at those words because there was nowhere left to hide inside them. The resentment had protected their pride. If you were responsible, then they never had to confront their own fear, expectations, or regret. But once they accepted that the decision belonged to them, something unexpected happened. The anger began losing its power. Memories of you no longer automatically carried the weight of everything they believed they had lost. Instead, they started remembering why you mattered enough to influence such a huge decision in the first place. And beneath all that buried resentment, another feeling was still waiting, one they had spent a long time trying not to name. Yet your soulmate understands that feelings alone cannot repair what blame damaged. They know an apology does not erase the moments when you were made to feel responsible for a future you never controlled. So they are considering something harder than simply saying, "I'm sorry." They want to tell you the entire truth without demanding anything in return. No invisible agreement. No expectation that you must choose them because they once chose you. And that may be the biggest change of all. But there is one detail they still haven't decided whether to reveal. During that recent conversation about the opportunity returning, they were asked a direct question: if the door truly opened again, would they finally take it? Your soulmate answered almost immediately. And surprisingly, their answer wasn't based on fear of losing you this time. It was based on something they have finally understood about what a real future with you would actually require. Their answer was simple, but it carried years of growth inside it. I won't abandon my future again just to prove that I love someone. That might sound frightening at first, especially after everything your soulmate once sacrificed for you. But this time, those words weren't a rejection of you. They were the first sign that they finally understood the mistake underneath everything that happened. Love was never supposed to require a silent sacrifice followed by an invisible debt. If they choose a new opportunity now, they want that choice to belong to them completely. And if they choose a future with you, they want that choice to come from honesty, not fear. For the first time, they are imagining something they couldn't imagine years ago. Perhaps they never had to choose between loving you and becoming who they were meant to become. Perhaps the real tragedy was believing those two things could never exist together. That realization brought them back to the words they are preparing to say to you. They don't want to begin with excuses. They don't want to tell you how difficult their life became and expect sympathy. They want to acknowledge the part that matters most. They blamed you for a decision you never made. And beneath that confession is another truth they are almost afraid to speak aloud. Even after everything, the resentment, distance, disappointment, and years of wondering about the road not taken, they still do not wish they had never known you. That surprised them. Because if you had truly destroyed their future, wouldn't they want to erase you from the story entirely? Instead, when they imagined going back and taking that original opportunity, something felt missing. Not because their sacrifice was correct, but because meeting you changed them in ways their old dream never accounted for. Don't skip. There is a difference between regretting how you made a choice and regretting the person you cared about when you made it. Your soulmate is finally beginning to understand that difference. And now they are approaching the hardest part. They can rebuild plans. They can pursue opportunities. They can stop carrying yesterday's resentment into tomorrow. But there is one thing they cannot repair alone: what their blame did to your connection. They know you may have spent a long time questioning whether you somehow ruined something precious for them. They know their silence may have made you carry questions that were never yours to answer. So before making their next major decision, they want one honest conversation with you, not to make you responsible again, but to finally remove that responsibility from your shoulders. Yet something unexpected happened while they were preparing to reach out. They found an old note they had written shortly after giving up that original future, long before resentment changed the story. And the person described in those private words was not someone they blamed at all. It was you. But what they wrote about the future they imagined with you may be the most revealing truth they have uncovered yet. The old note exposed something your soulmate could no longer rewrite. It had been written while their decision was still fresh, before disappointment turned into resentment, and nowhere in those private words did they accuse you of taking anything from them. Instead, they wrote about what they hoped might happen someday. They imagined telling you why they stayed. They imagined building a life where neither of you had to surrender your ambitions just to remain connected. And then came the sentence that made them stop reading. If this becomes something real, I want them beside me because they chose me freely, not because I gave something up for them. Your soulmate barely recognized the person who wrote that. Somewhere along the way, they had forgotten their own original intention. The sacrifice was never supposed to become a debt. Yet when life became painful, they transformed it into exactly that. And